Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fourth talk in our Alumni at Home with Mac webinar series. My name is Jessica Lounsbury, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, I'd like to thank you for joining us to hear from Jenille Hutchinson, a McMaster graduate and registered dietitian who will be discussing food, mood, and the connection between diet and mental health. Before I begin, I would like to take this time to recognize that McMaster's campus is currently on the traditional territory shared between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Nations, which was acknowledged in the dish with one spoon wampum belt. The wampum uses the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory and one spoon to represent that the people are to share the resources of the land and only take what they need. We always start our webinars with a land acknowledgement because it's important to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this land and the history that they share as a step towards reconciliation. Just a reminder that this talk is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's talk, as well as a link to our final At Home with Mac event taking place this evening within the next few hours. Thank you to all who pre-submitted questions during the registration process. If you have a question for Jenille, please feel free to type it in the Ask a Question section. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon, Jenille Hutchinson. Jenille is a registered dietitian with extensive knowledge in the relationship between nutrition and mental health. She graduated from McMaster University with an Honours Bachelor of Science in Psychology and later obtained an Honours Bachelor of Science at the University of Western Ontario in Food and Nutritional Science. Jenille then completed this intensive combined internship and Master's in Food and Nutritional Sciences at Western. Currently, she has a private practice called Feed Your Soul, where following a non-diet approach, she proudly works with clients of all ages and backgrounds, guiding them on creating positive relationship with food. Please join me in welcoming Jenille Hutchinson.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you. So I will start to share my screen so that we can get started on the webinar. Okay, great. So yes, thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon to discuss the connection between diet and mental health. And I just want to let everyone know also that throughout the presentation, I got some, I thank you so much for all the great questions, but throughout the presentation, I will be incorporating some of the answers to some of the questions that were submitted, but also please feel free at the end to add some additional questions. All right, so let's get started. So again, that was a great introduction. I don't really have to do much. I think that was really great in introducing who I am. And one of the big things that I really advocate for is that non-diet mentality. And also one thing you'll see throughout my presentation is that I really focus on food policies and food first. That's how we really want to think about when we're making our decisions on how we choose our foods and what we eat, but also that understanding that food plays a more important part in our everyday living, and it also has aspects into our social interactions and our relationships. So I'm really glad to be presenting on this topic today. So your mood, what is your mood? And this is really important and a rising a concern amongst Canadians, because 1 in 5 Canadians will experience some sort of mental illness within their lifetime. And so it's important that we start bringing some attention to this, because it's rising and it's something that we really need to start to take seriously. By the age of 40, about 50% of the population will have had some sort of mental illness. And there is a wide range, but this is what's happening in our society today. And it doesn't discriminate. There's all kinds of, if you want, in terms of who it affects. It affects people of all ages, education, income levels, and cultures. So we really have to take that into consideration, that nobody is immune, and we all have some type of exposure and predisposition to experience some type of mental illness. And some of the ones that we want to take some importance to is depression affects about 5.4 Canadian population and anxiety affecting about 4.6. And these are all statistics that, are ever changing. But what I want to bring the attention to is that these are serious, but it's yet overlooked for various reasons. And so I hope that throughout our presentation and even after the presentation, taking some time to realize and about your own mental health and maybe those of those close to you. So what we're thinking about now, our relationship of food and mood to the brain. So about 20% of our total energy supply, so the food from the foods that we eat, is used by the brain. So that is about 130 plus grams of carbs per day. And we're going to talk about the types of carbs because, again, not all carbs are created equal, but there is a direct line between our brain and our stomach. So just thinking about that for a quick second, sometimes when we're nervous or if something's coming up, you always see that queasiness in your stomach, or, even in TV shows, people before they go on stage to dance or something, it's like, oh, they get that. So there is a direct communication, and more research is actually coming out in this area between the gut-brain interaction. So then how does the food we eat affect this? And it's direct. So I put here, it says the standard American diet. However, I put Canadian in there because even though this particular terminology is an American terminology, it is transferable to our Canadian lifestyle. And basically what that gets to is saying that over the last century, what has happened is that we've continued, unfortunately, to move away from whole foods, as you can see here on one of the pictures, and focusing more on some ultra processed, more refined foods that unfortunately are leading to a diet of the one we see here with all the donuts and fast food. And it's not that we are, I do agree that at times, there are some foods that are healthy, that are processed. So that term is also something that can be discussed. But the idea behind it is that we are actually moving away from less nutrient dense foods. So unfortunately, we tend to be eating more foods that where all the nutrition is kind of stripped away because they're easier, they're ready to eat, they're more convenient, and that's what's causing some of these issues because we're just not getting the same density. So we're not getting the richness from the food that we used to get anymore. And don't get me wrong, as somebody who really promotes an overall healthy diet, I don't want you to think that, oh, I'm showing bad food and good food. No, we don't want to put these labels to it. What I'm doing here is just showing that, there's particular foods that we want to choose more often versus ones we want to choose less often. However, when we're talking about our emotions and our moods, we'll think about too, certain foods provide us with different emotions. And this is what we want to get to the heart of in terms of understanding what foods really make me feel better. So again, there's this bidirectional relationship between our stomach, our gut, and our brain. And so it's so important when we want to think about, okay, overall, how is this working? And there's research that shows mental health is affected by the gut microbiome. And that contributes if the gut microbiome, so if you want to say all the environment in our stomach, if it's compromised or we're not getting the right nutrients, it can lead to anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions. Also, digestive imbalance causes things like IBS. So a lot of times people do experience, and IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. They experience symptoms of constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas as a result of a compromised gut microbiome, which again then affects our brain, making us more sad, depressed. Also, there's research showing that, just overall, certain brain health, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson, are directly affected by what we eat. So I'm just also going to show here this picture, and I really like just to kind of give you an idea of this relationship. So if we look on side A, you'll see the foods that make us feel better in terms of our brain are our vegetables, things with fiber, um, taking certain supplements. Now we'll get into that in more detail. And the reason with the supplements, as I always say, food first, is that sometimes, unfortunately, based on where we live, processing, we're not able to get the types of nutrients we need. So it becomes helpful to have a supplement. Fermented foods also, and again, thinking about foods that are anti-inflammatory. Now on the side, where there are the foods, excuse me, sorry, or the foods that kind of make us feel a little bit, that don't really make us feel great, such as the hamburgers, chocolates, pizza. The funny thing is, though, in society, we have tied things like happiness, parties, all these things to those types of foods. For instance, if you think about birthday parties or events, they're filled with fancy cakes, donuts. So there's an emotion tied to the food rather than what it does for us. So you kind of think it's almost like, well, the foods that make us feel happy, right, emotion, actually don't make us feel happy physiologically in our body because unfortunately they do not provide the nutrients that we need. So that's where it becomes quite interesting. And that's where we have to really try to reframe how we think about certain foods. So now I'm going to go into more nutrients that are focused for a good mood. And you see here, there's a variety there also. And so this is what I want you to also think about is we're going to go into each one, but variety is important. So the first one we're going to start off with is omega. And the omegas was something that was brought up quite frequently in the questions that I received. So I really wanted to make sure I was diving into this and giving it some time, giving it a good explanation. And so there's increased activity in what we call the brain-derived neuropathic factor. And that's needed for cell growth and increasing cell connections. And that's what our omega-3 fatty acids really help. This helps with learning, memory, and our cognitive well-being. So it's important to think about how we can try and get these through diet if possible. Now, I've got some examples here because when we're thinking about omega-3 fatty acids, there are three sources, the EPA, DHA, and ALA. DHA and EPA usually come from what we call our animal sources. You'll see there's salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, egg yolks, and oil. When it comes to our ALO sources, those are our plant sources, and they come from walnuts, ground flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, canola oil, and all those are plant-derived sources. However, the plant-derived sources tend to be the inactive source, and so we need to make sure that we're trying to eat them with other foods. So this leads to this picture here. I wanted to show you about what are some of the positive effects. Again, is that, as I mentioned earlier, really helps fight inflammation, overall brain health, cognitive well-being, and just making sure that our brain is receiving the nutrients it needs. It has also a very protective factor. So sometimes we wonder, well, this is great, but then how much? How much do I need in my diet? And that's where we want to think about having about 2 servings of fatty fish per week. That's about 3 to 4 ounces or a deck of cards. So when you're thinking it's not a huge piece, but it's enough by having the fatty fish in our diet like discussed before. Or sometimes for any particular reason where you may not be able to have fatty fish. I know nowadays, oh my gosh, I went to the grocery store and when it comes to the fatty fish, I always try to promote buying wild rather than farmed, just because, again, it's something that promotes a natural environment from where the fish live. They're eating their natural foods. But trying to find it was one issue. And then when you found it, the price. So getting things like canned tuna and canned salmon are an affordable way to try to increase your fatty fish in your diet. As I said, just with food prices nowadays, as I do these presentations and I talk to people, I know it's easier said than done, but we really want to make sure that we're trying to find affordable ways to incorporate these foods. And then on the other hand, there's people who are allergic to seafood, or for instance, just don't even like it and may want to go to supplementation. But please, before you do so, please consult with your medical provider, just because we don't want it to interfere with any other medications you'd be taking. So, even when I talk about other supplements as we go through the presentation, I'm also going to be reinforcing to please consult with your medical provider, because sometimes we may experience some interactions. So just some ideas of how, just a couple recipe ideas, food meal ideas. So we've got one here that's a great source. It's just having a salad with baked salmon. And you can use the canned salmon for this too. It doesn't have to be something that you've prepared, from fresh. But a green salad we have here with some, grated cheese, that type of thing, is something really great to try and include some fatty fish. Or again, if you're not eating fish, walnut and mushroom ragu, because walnuts again are a source of omegas. So just some examples there, some meal ideas. Next, I'm going to talk about zinc. So zinc is another one too that has also been proven and shown to help with overall mental health, and it supports the body's functions of immunity and cellular health, and also in the brain. And we also has shown that if we are low in zinc, and this is something again you can speak to with your doctor, because sometimes it's not just shown in physical, we have to do blood work, but it does increase depressive symptoms. So if you're wondering, well, then how can I increase my zinc? We want to think of foods such as lean meats, beans, lentils, pumpkin seeds, peanuts, whole grains. And I emphasize the whole grains, so we're getting all the good stuff. Egg yolks, because the yolk is actually where we have most of the nutrition, and some fortified breakfast cereals. But also when it comes to the cereals, not all cereals are created equal. And so we really have to make sure we're looking at our food labels. So again, some meal ideas. You wonder, well, how do I incorporate this into my diet? Just having, for instance, on one side here, quinoa with black bean bowl, a quinoa black bean bowl with pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds. Or again, breakfast idea, adding pumpkin seeds to, cereal or whole grain toast. We got some fruit there. And just again, getting creative, because you can see we have pumpkin seeds, or you can use sunflower seeds used in two different ways. So it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, I got to go to the grocery store and I've got to buy all these separate things. You can incorporate some of these same ingredients into things. Even the pumpkin seeds, we want to think about our salad that was made earlier for omegas, throw some in there, or in the walnut ragu, so that you're utilizing your ingredients. And that's also very important, again, when we're thinking about food costs, reducing food waste, and when we're thinking about how to get the most out of the ingredients, how we can interchange them into different meals. Another one is magnesium. So a lot of times I get a lot of questions about magnesium, but as I said, always first line of defense is food. When we do our food recall and I ask people, well, what are you eating? I try to see, are they getting sources of magnesium from their diet rather than just jumping straight to a supplement? Another great one, hey, our friend pumpkin seeds is here again. So as you can see, pumpkin seeds has come up quite a few times. So you're kind of getting a few things, a few nutrients from this one particular food. Almonds, spinach, cashews, soy milk, black beans, edamame, and dark chocolate. These are shown to be some other ingredients that we use to have magnesium in our diet. So again, ask yourself before going to the store and buying, can I try to incorporate some of these foods first before just jumping to supplementation? Ask yourself that. And again, some recipe ideas just to spark some creativity. And I will say, I'm not a chef. One thing I always try to say when I meet with people is that there are some dietitians out there that are great cookbooks. They got the ideas, they got all of that. And for me, I'm not a chef. I love food. I know, but when it comes to creating some of these wonderful dishes, I look and I'm like, oh, I am in awe. So you don't have to be, as I say, well, you're a dietitian, so you must know how to make all kind. I'm like, no, 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 I don't. But I try to get creative with ingredients. So I'm not making these fancy parfaits that you see there or this noodle bowl. But what I am doing is trying to see how I can include certain foods in the diet. So again, dark chocolate with granola, oats, nuts, and seeds, or we have here on this side a rice noodle. Again, pumpkin seeds can be something that you can interchange throughout all of these. Vitamin D. Now, this is another one, and I find this one to be very important. Just on a side note, based on where we live, we're just not exposed to the sun as much. So our climate and also the sun is not really the greatest. So we should really be, our ozone, I should say, exposing ourselves. So a lot of times we are deficient in vitamin D, especially those of color. We tend to be a bit lower in our vitamin D conversion. So it's helpful to think about supplementation. But of course, again, always speaking with your healthcare provider. So sources, cod liver oil, herring, so our fatty fish, just to kind of sum that piece up. Things like, again, that egg yolk and shrimp. But again, as I said, when it comes to vitamin D, actually taking a supplement, a basic supplement, Jameson, whatever it may be, of about 600 is basic, up to 1,000 is what is, if you want to say, just there's is therapeutic, but what is just recommended. But some people may need more, and that's what you need to discuss with your healthcare provider. And blood tests, of course, can be done to see if you do need a little bit more. Next is antioxidants. So our antioxidants, those comes from our berries, grapes, pomegranate, buckwheat, walnuts, peanuts, coffee, green teas. These are things that we get some of the antioxidants from. And of course, it just shows to reduce inflammation and help to fight against cell aging. Prebiotics and probiotics are also very useful to include in the diet. You get those again from when we do a prebiotics, so that helps the environment for the probiotics. Onions, garlic, leeks, bananas, dandelions, artichokes. These things have our prebiotics. Also things like kimchi. As you see, outlets coming up there for our probiotic sources: kefir, yogurt, kombucha, tempeh, sauerkraut, miso, things again that we can think about including in our diet that's really going to help. And this helps with the gut environment. So remember I spoke earlier about the gut microbiome. So if you want to think about our stomach almost like a garden, we want to make sure the garden can grow the healthy bacteria. And so we and probiotics are like help with the soil and help to really promote a healthy gut microbiome, which again affects and can affect our brain health. And again, showing some recipes here. We've got a kale salad with tempeh. So tempeh is fermented soybeans. Or if you wanted to make a tuna sandwich, and that tuna is actually chickpeas, because I saw that there's this, they call chickpeas the tuna. It's a tuna. It's the tuna of the sea, or sorry, the chickpeas of the sea. And so it gives you that tuna kind of flakiness, and when you mix it in the way you would make your tuna salad, um, you can use that as again a more vegan or plant-based version, but adding yogurt instead of mayonnaise to again add some of those prebiotics and probiotics. So now we want to think about, well, kind of wrapping things up. And I know a lot of you guys have probably heard about the Mediterranean lifestyle. And it doesn't mean that, okay, we have to follow, but it's just how everything's going to group together because a lot of these things are incorporated in other cultures and other lifestyles. But the Mediterranean diet has gotten a lot of research and just showing that a diet, regardless if it's Mediterranean or not, that includes fatty fish, fruits, leafy greens, nuts, olives, whole grains, limited red meat and cheese. This one here, the wine in moderation, of course, and movement, exercise, very important, and strong social relationships. And when I look at that, I'm like, well, you know what? This is something that can be a part of everybody's lifestyles, not just Mediterranean. But the key idea is that what we've got is some whole ingredients that contain those nutrients and vitamins and minerals that were discussed throughout this presentation. Then our nutrition habits are also very important to consider. So really trying to reduce our stress around and about food. Eat consistently and eating enough. Really trying to limit alcohol. So I know I did say wine in moderation early, but again, moderation. And quitting tobacco and, trying to, again, join smoking cessation groups that are out there really are going to help. Two areas I want to delve into in more detail, though, as for the purposes of what we're talking about today for our nutrition habits. I really like, this is one thing I am really, if you want to say passionate about, is that we eat what we enjoy and enjoy what you eat. Because a lot of people have this dread. Oh, I need to go on a diet. You're going to tell me I can't eat the foods I like. And it just seems dreadful. And we're dragging through our discussions. And I try to say, no, 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 that's not the intention at all. I want you to think about how you can have a positive relationship with food. And there's many reasons, as we delve into different things on why people have food associations. But what we want to think about is really having a positive relationship and freeing ourselves from that diet mentality because we need to eat. It's something that is a part of our everyday lifestyle. This is something that we really need to embrace. And imagine every day dreading something. How positive is that for our mental health? So I want you to think about that. And that, is something really in terms of when we're trying to think about one of the questions that came up was, are foods to make me happy? And we think about this, happiness equal food. And when we think about that in more detail, not exactly. It's our emotions that we tie to that food. And yes, there are foods, as we go back, if we think way back to the beginning of the presentation, of foods that are good for us, that release the good endorphins, right? So when you're thinking about like chocolate, and we're not talking about like, an Aero bar. I'm talking about dark chocolate where you can get the antioxidants from. There are other foods that give us antioxidants that are good for our brain health and release those endorphins. Berries, but we don't look at chocolate the same way as we look at a bowl of berries. So a lot of time through society and how we've grown, we make associations based on emotions. I've said to people before, if it's your birthday and someone brings you a bag of carrots versus a cupcake, how do you feel? The person who brings you the cupcake, you're like, yeah, thank you so much. And most people, the person, if I gave you a bag of carrots, would say, what is this? What do you think? But actually, the person who gave you the bag of carrots is actually giving you something that's going to elicit more of the healthy side of things and elicit more healthy, happy hormones in your body versus, let's say, the vanilla high sugar cupcake with candy on. So it's really trying to get that understanding of how foods make us feel and the associations that we've placed on them. And it's part of, I kind of look at it and, I'm a mom and I think about my kids and I think about as an adult and how we look at food. And when you look at kids' cereal boxes and you look at things marketed towards kids, there's always like flashy colors, squishmallows, things to attract them, regardless of the nutrient value. And then, but you don't see those fancy things or advertisements on, let's say, a healthier granola bar, or let's say, some vegetables or anything like that. So we could walk down the cereal aisle and you'll see all the fancy cartoons are on the sweet cereals versus those that are on, nothing is really on the ones that aren't so great. The ones that are great for us. So unfortunately, society has also placed this mentality of what foods make us feel happy, but that's the emotional piece because we're really thinking about the foods that do make us feel happy physically. They tend to be those foods, as we talked about earlier, such as your leafy green vegetables, your fermented foods, your omegas, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, antioxidants, probiotics. Those are the foods that help with making the body feel happy, which will make your brain feel happy. So I could even delve into a whole topic on that issue, but I hope I was able to drive through that, and answer that question that did come up a few times about if there's foods that equal happiness. And so it's really about how we look at things too, because as I said, those foods that we think make us happy don't really. Another thing that's came up is about, uh, how much to eat and how do we know I'm eating enough. And this is a standard eating schedule. Regardless of your particular work schedule, lifestyle, I want you to think about eating in the time frame. So here I've got time set. It's just for um, explanation purposes. So you don't have to eat at 8, 10. No, it's just that you want to have breakfast around 8 a.m. If you wake up at 7, actually should have put that because you want to have breakfast within the hour of waking up. So let's say 8 a.m. You may, depending on the type of breakfast you had, you require a snack, have lunch at 12, a snack around 3, dinner around 6, and an evening snack around 8 o'clock. Now, it does seem like a lot, but remember, we're going to focus on nutrient density. And when you focus on nutrient density of your foods, it's not about volume. And how your plate looks is going to be, if you want to say, it's going to determine if you actually need a snack. So if you're having a complete breakfast where you're having protein and fiber, things to help get you up going in the morning, you may not necessarily need a morning snack. It could probably tie you over to lunch. But the idea is I don't want large gaps in between meals. And we're going to get into another question in a second, because I can kind of hear people through, I can see the vibes coming through about another question that came up in the ones that were submitted. And the idea is that we don't want to feel overly hungry so that we tend to overeat at one particular meal. So I've had people say, oh, you know what? I have a big lunch. Too busy in the morning, so I'll have a bigger lunch. Or I skip lunch. I have breakfast. I skip lunch because at dinner, I make sure I've got big dinner. And we really don't want to go into that route because, again, it goes into the nutritional load. So trying to eat consistently really helps to balance our blood sugars and really helps us with our overall hunger. Now, this is going to come to the question, intermittent fasting. So I got a few questions about this. So it's kind of like, well, you just said about eating on a regular schedule, but what about intermittent fasting? And that's something that comes up a lot in terms of my practice questions. And I will say intermittent fasting is not a one size fits all. So I did a bit of background research on this, and I want to show that there are positive and negative effects to it. And the good things about with intermittent fasting when it comes to our mood, again, is that it does help regulate our blood sugars. And the reason why for that is because, again, we're eating by this schedule, and it increases the feel-good hormones, those endorphins, because, again, on the type of food we're eating. But when it comes to our eating window, there's a psychological, they're like, it's time to eat now. I've got that. Again, increase that self-control, another point. So, that mind-body awareness is that regardless of your time frame, I know there's 16/8, there's all different times of um, fasting versus eating windows. But what that piece has shown control, so that when people are in their fasting, they find themselves almost in a mentally controlled state where they know my eating time is between this and this. That is my time to eating. I focus on other things. And because you're following this regimented schedule, it really brings again that regulation. Your blood sugars start to adjust because it knows, okay, the body knows when it's getting food versus when it's not. And then again, it comes down to that body awareness. However, the types of food we eat in our eating window is extremely important. So we want to make sure that we're eating the foods that are good for us in terms of when we talked about earlier, the ones that help promote a healthy gut during our eating window. So that's where you get the reducing of inflammation and all the feel good stuff. But if we're eating, let's say, donuts, pizzas, and whatever, things, McDonald's in our eating window, it's not going to be the same effects. Now, some of the negative effects that I've seen is that if we're not doing it properly, it can increase your hunger and cravings because it's like, oh my gosh, I just feel, and then irritability starts to come, and then you just really start to feel cranky, tired, and digestive issues. So it can work against us, especially though, I always say for those who have certain kinds of chronic illnesses, please consult with a healthcare provider before jumping into intermittent fasting, because we look on the internet and we see all the good. We see how the things are working for some, but we unfortunately do not see the other side. And intermittent fasting, from what I've seen it work great for some, but not so great for others. So before jumping into it, do the background, talk to your healthcare provider, and ask yourself, is this something I can realistically commit to? And what are the types of foods that I am going to eat during my eating window? So it's not going into it blindly, but you can reap the benefits of intermittent fasting for health reasons and mental health reasons. But again, on the other side, there is that, really starting to think about, is this something for me? And that's where we really try to think about, okay, that's maybe where we might run into a bit of issues. Okay, so, you know, as I said, this was a question that was brought up in terms of intermittent fasting and moods. But again, it all does come down to the types of food you're eating and how it affects our overall health. And this brings me to another point is, are you actually eating enough? And so even when I discussed the eating schedule that was brought up earlier, and even discussing intermittent fasting, it all comes down to the foods and the combination of foods you're eating. So a lot of times people will say to me, oh yeah, I had a bowl of cereal, then I had a salad for lunch, go home and, I'm going to have 2 slices of pizza. And yes, it may make you feel full, but oh, I'm fine with that. But first of all, we look at nutrient density, and foods work together. They have a relationship. So making sure that you're following this here is actually taken from Canada's food guide, but the plate method. And what it really comes down to when we're looking at our meals, okay, we want to think about, okay, if half of our plate consists of vegetables. So I know there's some fruit here, but let's just, for argument's sake, we're having vegetables, non-starchy vegetables. So not potatoes, not corn. Those are going to go more into our grains. But we're looking at green leafy vegetables, things mushroom, broccoli, cauliflower, those types of things is what we want to consist of to be the star of our plate. We also want to make sure that we're including proteins and a variety of proteins. So our lean meats, yes, are important. And this is where you can start incorporating some of those omegas from fatty fish, but also plant protein sources. So as you can see there, we've got beans, we've got um, tofu, yogurt is there too, eggs, nuts, seeds, a combination of different types of protein. Because when we have things, again, everything in moderation, but a combination and a variety, that also makes our body happy because we're not just getting one thing. And as I said, because food has a relationship and they work together, it's like, we've got the vitamin C to help, unlock the iron. We've got this to help unlock that. So they work together. And our grains, our whole grains, a low carb phase, something that has been around for ages. And I see a lot of these diets of people saying, oh, they're going to cut carbs and they're not going to have carbs. We're doing ourselves a disjustice, especially when it comes to our brain health. Even if you've ever heard the term hangry, or, sometimes when people start to cut carbs, they become very tired, irritable. Remember when I said in the beginning about the brain? 130 grams or plus or more, depending on your size, of carbohydrates are needed and 20% of our energy source for our brain. If we're taking that away, how can we expect our brain to work properly? So we want to think about this. It's the types of carbs. So moving away from the processed, refined, as I said, like the donuts, those types of carbohydrates, white rice, and incorporating some more of the whole grains. Those are the ones that we want to focus on when it comes to our overall diet and helping with our brain health. So it's very important that we include this combination for feeling great. Because there's a piece of the puzzle missing, then there's going to be a piece that our body's missing. And therefore, we're not going to be able to have that. As I said, we're thinking about how food is going to help our mental health, is that the environment in our body isn't strong enough to help with our environment outside, the external factors that can help with our mental health. Because mostly for the external factors to work better, let's say, yoga, therapy, doing journaling, those things, we also need to make sure that we have the internal factors, and that's where food comes in. So this kind of brings me to a recap of some of the things we talked about. So we talked about that relationship between the brain and the gut is really, they are connected. And we may not see it, and it's lots of great research is coming out on this gut-brain interaction. But we really need to start focusing on that because, as I said, healthy gut, healthy brain. We look at it that way. We had talked about some key nutrients, omegas, zinc, magnesium, our antioxidants, pre and probiotics. And then I just wrapped up with some nutritional habits to think about. So bring that joy back into food. Again, that term, to eat what you enjoy and enjoy what you eat. Don't bring that guilt like, oh, I ate this and then I'm stressed now. No, we don't want to deal with that. We want to make sure that we are, again, looking at food as a way to nourish our body and enjoying it, and everything in moderation. Enjoy a piece of cake, but knowing that you're not having cake every day, enjoy. I said that glass of wine in moderation if you drink, have that and then step away. Because when we start tying guilt and negative emotions to food, that is where we start to, again, that downward spiral in terms of understanding, well, the things I enjoy, I cannot eat, but it's not really like that. It's about a reframing and making sure you've got these key ingredients as to set that environment inside, the healthy environment, so that when you're engaging in things, on the external, you can really reap the benefits. So you have the energy to go for a walk, on a nice day outside. You have the energy to read your favorite book, and be alert. You have that energy to talk to a friend or a therapist or somebody in your life that brings you joy. These are the things I want you to think about, and I hope you've been able to gather from my presentation. So that again brings me to the end of my presentation for today. Thank you so much for spending your lunch hour with me. And I really hope you were able to at least pull away a few tidbits from some of the things that I've said. And if by any chance you yourself or people who would love to hear additional information, or have an idea that they'd like to talk about for a wellness group or event, please feel free to reach out. I would love to take part because I do enjoy doing this for the Alumni Association here. I've done it a few times. Master has a very I wouldn't say a place in my heart, and so this is something that I truly enjoy, but I just want to thank you so much for joining me today.
That's wonderful, Jenille. Thank you so much. Lots of great information and some tips and tricks. And we've got lots of questions here. So we'll get to what we can in our allotted time. I just want to start off. So someone's asking if you have any advice for those of us who are very busy and often don't have time to focus on food. Is there a strategy maybe some people could try?
Mhm. Yes. So one thing, that I would say that even is meal plan. You know, if you have that plan, and it doesn't have to be something set out, doesn't have to be as like Instagram worthy or anything like that, but something where, you go to the grocery store and okay, this is what I'm going to bring for my lunches, and start with a singular meal. Um, Sometimes it can be overwhelming if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to plan breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, all of that. But if you're just starting out, think about a singular meal. So I'm going to plan my breakfasts for the week, or I'm going to plan my lunches, and pick one day and a couple hours from that day to batch cook. So, for instance, if you like oatmeal, making oatmeal something really good I can keep in the fridge. So because I'm not into, and I'm gonna say this, the Quaker minute oats that you just open the package, because again it's more processed and we're not getting as much of the nutrients. So let's try a stove top. People sometimes cook them in the slow cooker, and like something like a steel cut oats. And it can actually stay in the fridge if you have it in a proper sealed container for up to 5 days. So you can do that with oatmeal, or boil eggs. You can boil a bunch of eggs, keep them in the shell, and keep them in the fridge for about 5 days. I wouldn't go over that, but 3 to 5 days in a sealed container in your fridge. So things that you can easily grab, so that if you, let's say you have early mornings, you're not thinking, oh my gosh, now I got to spend 2 hours or an hour or even 15 minutes making a meal. No, you can grab and go. Chop up some fruits, chop up some vegetables, do it that way, and have that in your fridge, so that taking those 2 hours that it may take you to prepare that. I know I have 3 kids. Sometimes I'm thinking, oh gosh, 2 hours is it's time. But in the long term, you will thank yourself. You will think, yay, I did this, for myself. And then the family can also grab and go some of these things too. So all it takes is preparing either some fruits, vegetables, oatmeal, eggs, that type of thing, as quick, easy to go, so that you can take that on your way. But yes, meal planning is one of the best ways to kind of combat that crunch time.
That's great. Thanks. And I imagine the more you do it, the easier it becomes
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
it becomes routine.
Yeah.
And another tip I have for that too is that, well, for me, I find it best when I go to the grocery store and I come home and I'm unloading, then I do it all then. I
Yeah.
just get it done.
Make a day or morning of it.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
I bought all the fruits, I bought all the apples, I bought all of this, I just get it all done rather than putting it away and then having to schedule more time. Because again, I know how time is. I've got the kids, and our weekends are like boom, 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 boom. So for me, A strategy that works is that once I come home from groceries, I do it all. I'm in the kitchen, I'm in that mind frame, get it done.
Sounds great. Our next question is, how do you best avoid emotional eating when you don't even recognize you're doing it in the moment?
Yes. And that's where going back to the eating schedule comes in play. If you have yourself doing an eating schedule, and I've actually told um, clients to program it on your phone. We have so many of these devices nowadays. Hey, use them for something, that's beneficial. And if we eat by a schedule where we are feeding our body on a regular basis, usually emotional eating kind of comes at us unexpectedly. And so, if our stomach is never in a state of starvation, we won't tend to eat as much. Now, it's not saying that you won't maybe go for that chocolate or go for that food, but in terms of the amount, it will help reduce the amount that you will eat. So, trying to really get yourself on a consistent way of eating is what will really help combat some of that emotional eating, especially because when we eat for our emotions, again, we tend to overeat. Now, coming also back to one of the points made in terms of how our food association. So when we're emotional, unfortunately, we're not really going for, oh, I'm going to have carrot sticks and hummus. That's not really what people go for when they're feeling sad. You know, they're going for, oh, I'm going to treat myself to an ice cream or I'm going to do this. And you know what? If you're in that moment, do it. Give yourself that ice cream or that in that moment. But if this again becomes something that you're going through a particular, I would say, a particular valley in your life and there's something's going on, that's when I always recommend, talking to somebody, getting to the root cause, because the food is only a band-aid solution at that time.
Yeah, sounds good. You had mentioned using phones and stuff. We have a couple questions here. I'm going to try to kind of rope them into one. But is there any either tracking apps or technology that could help? You mentioned all of the, different areas of foods to focus on that help with mood, but are there any apps or technology or devices that could help people track that to make sure they're staying on track and getting the supplements, the magnesium, the vitamin D, all of that kind of stuff? Is there any you would recommend?
Now, in terms of there's a few out there, and they all come with different it was it like with different features based on how much you want to pay,
Right.
right? So that is the fine print there because honestly, I used to really use MyFitnessPal, and they changed over the years. And where, oh, if you want this breakdown, oh, you need to upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, here we go, right? And I know also with the Apple Watches, they also come with food journals or ways to analyze the food. Now, with the food apps, what I want to air a bit of caution on is I don't want you focusing on counting the calories because unfortunately, that's what people will do. They'll be like, oh, I had 1,200 calories today. But how much nutrients did you have? That's what's key. So you want something that's going to be able to track your macros, such as your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And from there, it will be able to track better your vitamins and nutrients. So in terms of any particular apps, there is, as I said, MyFitnessPal. Oh my gosh, there was another one. The Carrot app. There was one like that. I was just trying to look and see if I had any. I had a few that I was kind of testing out, but as I said, what I found was to be the catch 22 was they wanted, oh, to upgrade, upgrade, upgrade for more information that you wanted. So that's a personal decision if you want to go on and do that. But what I want you to focus on in whatever app you choose is that you're focusing on the macronutrients and then looking at the vitamins, not counting calories.
Okay, that's great. I'm just looking quickly at the questions here, and one of our viewers also recommended my net diary. So I'm not sure
Oh,
what that
my
one. I
net
haven't
diary.
heard of that
Okay,
one.
I'll look into
That
that one
might
too.
be something to look into.
Yeah, that's why I love these discussions and these
Yeah.
panels and things like that, because I find that when we have even open groups, I learn a lot of new things too. Another app that just came to my mind, it doesn't really track like calories or anything like that. It's called the Yuka app, and you can do it for food. It does a bunch of products, but at least it can also give you a breakdown of types of things that are in the food. But
Mm.
again, as I said, there's so many out there. It's basically what you are from, what you're comfortable using, and is, making sure that you are looking at, is it giving you the right things for the nutrient breakdown?
Yeah, even just tracking with a pen and paper to make sure you're kind of hitting all those groups
There
you
you
were
go.
talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
We've got time for probably one more question before we wrap things up here. One of our viewers is asking, how do you balance brain food, i.e. nuts, lentils, squash, etc., with limiting oxalate intake, which inhibits calcium absorption?
Yes, exactly. So, and especially, so cooking method too, right? And again, especially if you do have issues, kidney function, um, or any type of issues with, you need extra calcium. And so there's been cooking methods that help when it comes to how you are preparing your legumes. So to help reduce those, those oxalates, but again, everything in moderation. So it's not that you would include all of those, let's say, in your meal. It's that variety. So maybe, yes, you'll have a lentil dish, and then, yes, maybe you'll have, another dish with some nuts and seeds. It's balancing and having that variety so that the load, so the amount that you put in isn't too hard on the body, because that's where I always find also I'm a little weary with supplementation, because if we over supplement, sometimes people feel more is better, right? Mm-mm, it's not when it comes to our body. So look at cooking method. I've seen about how um washing your beans, soaking, that type of thing. There's a lot of also wide tales about like soaking them in baking soda to help soften them, gets rid of some of that. So there's different things like that. But again, variety and mixing up the different types you have throughout in your overall diet.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenille. And I just want to, we're running out of time. We had lots of questions in the queue, which we won't have time to get to all of them today. But as you can see on the screen, Jenille has her email there. And we will be sending out a recording of this talk so you can go back and review it. We will also be sending out an email in the next couple hours that will have a link to the recording, but also a link to our next At Home with Mac series event, which takes place tonight at 7 p.m. It's with Terry Bennett and Gina Robinson from Mac's Money Center, who will join us to discuss financial behaviors, understanding our relationship with money. So again, a link to more information and registration will be included in the post-event email, as well as a quick survey. If you guys watching today could take a few minutes to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate the feedback. Jenille, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy day today. And thank you to all of our viewers online who tuned in. We really appreciate it and hope you can join our last At Home with Mac talk this evening. Thank you all so much and enjoy your evening or afternoon. Sorry. Have a good day.